Hare Krishna. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for tuning in, and please share, please comment. We have a couple of guests, Sanaka Prabhu and Dhira Govinda Prabhu. Their long-standing involvement with this particular case, the case of Bhakti Vijayapurna. Bhakti Vijayapurna was the headmaster for some time of the Mayapur Gurukula and very actively involved for 20, 30 years in various forms of child education. And it seems that for much of that time, engaged in very abusive practices, which have now come to a head. And finally, after I think the third CPO investigation, we're seeing more stringent restrictions. So let's get some introductions going. Dhira Govinda Prabhu, you were the Child Protection Office Director from 98 through 2004 and have actually handled the Bhakti Vijayapurna case several times. Tell us a little bit about your history with this case.
Okay, Hare Krishna. Thank you, Damodar Prabhu. Right, so we opened the Child Protection Office early in 1998, and then I think there's this case, and then there's many cases connected with it. I saw in the title of the podcast it says systemic. The word systemic is used, so that's a very appropriate term. All right, so I started looking at the files of, I'll call it the cases of the Mayapur school, and I've, as I've expressed many times, yeah, this is the most in my experience in my service, Child Protection Office Director, and in what I've heard in years since then, since 2004. Yeah, the history of the Mayapur school from the late 70s, particularly through 91, it's the most egregious, severe child maltreatment in ISKCON history, and it's quite severe. It's quite severe. Yeah, I've used terminology like let's say if this case file were to be put on the desk of a child protective investigator in Melbourne, Australia, or in New York or Gainesville, Florida, the investigative team, just by looking at the case file, they would say, well, this seems to be a deliberate, intentional ring of multi-generational pedophile activity. Of all the cases, the Mayapur cases, this is the one. I'm going to say that this is the creepiest, the most spooky. This is the one where it would be hardest, and I'm not saying that it is or was a intentional, deliberate ring of pedophiles. I'm saying that that's the impression that it would give child protective investigator. And apart from my service in ISKCON in this field, I also did serve in the state of Florida in child protective investigations, foster care, counseling, things like that. So yeah, this is the one, the Mayapur cases in the Mayapur school, and most of those years, late 70s through 91, it was supervised, the principal school is Bhakti Vijayapurna Swami. This is the one where it would be hardest to say, well, I guess they just didn't know. This is the one where it would be hardest to say, where, yeah, I guess they just didn't understand, or naivete. This is the one where, again, it's like it most appears, I'm not saying it is, but it most appears as, there's something very intentional going on in a systemic way, not one person or two persons. That's the way it appears from the case files. And I recognize that in going through the case files. Now, one thing some might say, well, I heard more, and of course, Sanaka grew up in the Vrindavan Gurukul like that. Many might say, well, I've heard a lot more about the Vrindavan Gurukul abuses from the 80s and like that. And I'll just say that, and not to in any way minimize what happened in Vrindavan, the Mayapur cases, all in all, were more severe and extensive from my, based on what I've seen and the interviews. But for the most part, as years and decades went on, those who suffered child maltreatment in Mayapur, they were, I'm not really involved now, but maybe still are. They were less likely to speak up compared to child abuse cases in other parts of the ISKCON world. In other parts of the world where maybe those who suffered the child abuse, they were in like Western type bodies, and when they came of age, there was more of a culture of speaking up. I remember in 1999, 2000, I went to Mayapur 4 years in a row in my service as Child Protection Office Director in 99, 2000, 2001, 2002. And the young adults there who suffered terrible abuse in the Gurukul, including child sexual abuse, physical abuse, child neglect, like that, emotional abuse. They said that, look, dear Govinda, if I were to speak up, it's very probable tomorrow my mother will be drowned in the Ganges. So there was so much of a culture of fear to speak up, more than like in other places. And looking in the case files, I saw there were letters from like 1991 from Sri Ram Prabhu. He was the director of education for ISKCON at the time. There was no child protection office back in 91, but so the director of education, he was, giving effort to deal with reports of child abuse. And Sri Ram, he wrote to Bhaktivinoda Swami. He wrote to directors. He wrote to directors of ISKCON Mayapur, that because Bhaktivinoda Swami was saying, well, oh yeah, what's happening? It's because we allowed low-class boys into the school. It's because the staff wasn't trained. And then Sri Ram, he wrote, he said, look, we've gotten these reports for many years, meaning going deep into the 80s. And he said, no, the real cause is the community and school attitude of tolerance for mistreating children. He said, that's the real cause. And what you're saying, and what you're saying, it just shows an abject lack of responsibility. And we'll just say, like I don't know what's happening in management now, but at that time, like 1991, Mayapur was governed by the ISKCON Mayapur by the Mayapur Administrative Council. The chairperson, the director of the Mayapur Administrative Council, was someone who was known at that time to have sexually abused teenage boys. Okay. And obviously, and there was he was the director of the Mayapur Administrative Council, and it came out he actually violently abused them, caused them injury, sent them to the hospital with his sexual abuse. And he was the director of the Mayapur Administrative Council. And that investigation in 1991, which when I read it, I was impressed with the investigation. It was conducted by Adi Karta, Bhaktarupa Dhira, Toshan Krishna Prabhu's. They probably had little to no resources, and it was very sober and balanced and professional, and they came out with a report. And it's clear, not everyone, but for the most part, the Mayapur leadership, including the director, who was a known child sex abuser himself at the time, and he was the director of the Mayapur Administrative Council, and they were disparaging the investigation. They were minimizing it like that. So even back a decade or so before I came on the scene, there were devotees in leadership positions internationally who were saying, like, no, there's a systemic attitude here in ISKCON Mayapur, with Bhaktivinoda Maharaj playing a significant role in that. There's a systemic attitude of tolerating, allowing, even encouraging child maltreatment of all forms, including violent sexual abuse. Okay. Okay. And all right. So then early in '99, I went to Mayapur for the first time in my capacity as child protection director. I uh, I had two in-person meetings with Bhakti Vijayaporna Swami. Actually, my sense is we not that it's important. I think we had a nice rapport. We got along well. When he visited Alachua, we also had meetings. He came. I hosted him in my house for lunch. I just want to say, like, I never had an adversarial mood. Okay, same time, we are investigation for the protection of children and for the integrity of Prabhupada's movement. And so at some of those meetings, at one of those meetings, Anutama Prabhu was president. Some of those meetings, Sadbhuj Prabhu, so Mayapur was president. Others were also present during those meetings, and so after I had two, one on February 11th, 1999, one on February 19th, 99. I remember at one of those meetings, and this is in April of 99, I wrote a report on the school that was directed, for which Bhakti Vidya Purnaraj was principal. Anyone interested in important, relevant history to the case, I urge them to closely read that report on the Bhaktivedanta Village School, especially the first part of it. I have transcriptions of my talks with Bhaktivedanta Purna Swami, like that. During some of those talks, we were talking about, of course, protecting children, and it was clear that two known abusers were regular visitors to the school. They were regular visitors to the school. One was Murari Gupta, the other was Satadanya. And they were hanging out at the school, and they were both known to be sexual abusers of boys. And so I mentioned this to Maharaj, like, this isn't safe. This isn't good, to understate the case. This is a risk. They're known abusers, and from what I'm hearing, they're coming here regularly, if not every day, then pretty regularly. And so Maharaj and I had, some dialogue around that. And then after the meeting, I think it was after the meeting, I was walking back, some of you are familiar with Mayapur, along the trail up towards the temple. And I was walking with Sadbhuj. And Sadbhuj, he was at that meeting. And then we were right around the sugarcane juice stand. And Sadbhuj, he stops and he turns to me and he said, well, you told Maharaj you strongly recommended that Murari Gupta and Satadanya shouldn't be allowed on the campus of the school like that. So I said, yeah, it seems common sense, like that. And then Sadbhuj, he looked at me in the eye and he said, but Satadanya and Murari Gupta, they're Maharaj's best friends. So, there was just, I'm just doing a few highlights here. I didn't know how, I felt defeated. Like I didn't know how to respond. Kind of like, okay, I don't know. Maybe the principal of the school ought to get a new set of friends. Maybe I'm judgmental. I don't know. Like I didn't say those things. I was just kind of dumbstruck. I said, oh, they're his best friends. I can imagine it would be hard for him to not invite them to have access to the teenage boys. Like I didn't know what to say. Okay, but that characterizes, what my experience. My experience of the crazy making around these cases. Okay, so then, at some point during the interviews. This is in February 11th and February 19th, 1999. And again, I wrote a report about this in April of that year, April of 99. So at some point, I'm talking to Maharaj about what happened, and he says that he said very clearly, and this is recorded and transcribed, he said very clearly that, oh yeah, the what happened, he said it was all consensual between the boys. It was all consensual, 100% consensual between boys of the same age, 100% consensual. Okay, so we go on like that for a while. Boys playing, boys do that. All right. So then at some point I asked him about the 1991 report. And he said, yeah, I don't think I've seen that. No, I don't think I've seen that. So I talked to him, and then at some point in the meeting, him, and he had one of his main disciples and teachers there. I have the name, but I won't say the name now. And when I asked about the 91 report, him and his disciple, a main teacher there, they sort of chortled, giggled to each other, and they said, yeah, like they never got that report. It's impossible to get. They kind of laughed it off. So at some point, a few minutes later, I pull out of my cloth bag a copy of the report. And basically, I had been in Mayapur about 72 hours. And I asked around, and I actually got three copies of the report. And this is Bhaktivinoda Maharaj, who was the supervisor of the school during all that abuse, which he said was all consensual. And I pulled out the report, and I said, and he had already said that 91 report, Bhaktivinoda Maharaj, he said, oh, that was very well done. He respected the work of Adi Karta, Dai Ram, like that. And I said, now, first of all, the report starts, please call it, like in one sense, knowing I was going to talk about this case, even before we started, I was feeling frustrated that like I would probably be ineffective in conveying the depth and layers of the deception and concealment and lies and crazy making. But I'm doing my best here. All right. So the report starts with a cover letter from Bhaktivinoda Swami and Nareshwar Prabhu, who was a leader, maybe still is, in Mayapur. And their cover letter clearly says about what's in the report, all of the atrocities that are in the report. And they said, but we're fixing things, we're reforming things. So the cover letter makes it clear Bhaktivinoda Swami had read the report. The report, which Bhaktivinoda Swami acknowledges was a high quality report and investigation. He supported it. The report describes dozens of boys involved in force, violent, sexual abuse to the older boys, to the younger boys, the middle-aged boys, to the younger boys. Bhaktivinoda Swami said, oh yes, it was all consensual, same age. The report says it wasn't consensual, it was forced, and there was significant age disparity, violent sexual abuse, rapes like that, perpetrated. And okay, so then when I came out with the report, then and I said, well, Bhaktivinoda Swami, you said you haven't seen the report. Here in the report, there's a letter that's saying you've read the report and you acknowledge what's there, and what you acknowledged in 1991. Now you're saying something completely different, not just completely different than what's in the report, completely different than what you said in 1991. So, okay. So he was caught in so many lies there. Okay. So then my report on Bhakti Vedanta Gurukul Village that came out in April 1999, we sent that to all the GBCs, including those who were GBCs in Mayapur in 1991. And I'll mention Shivaram Swami was a GBC for at least several years in Mayapur, including those years when the 91 1991 report was done. And for me, it was inconceivable. How could someone? Because the main things in that time, the accusations against Dr. Swami, it was about he knew about the extensive abuse, and he didn't do anything. He let it go on. He did not respond in any reasonably responsible way. He let it go on. If such a thing happened, like for example, a few years ago, the president of Penn State University went to prison because he didn't act responsibly to accusations of child sexual abuse that were happening within his supervision jurisdiction. What happened in Mayapur is far more extensive than Penn State.
Let's pause for a moment there, dear Govinda Prabhu. Let's bring Sanaka into the conversation. I think Sanaka's been waiting to contribute for a bit.
No, I just wanted to add briefly, dear Govinda, that some of the students reported that Bhaktivedanta Purnaswami punished them. He beat them when they came to report sexual. Not only did he not do anything, but he actively discouraged reporting by beating some of the students that came to report and ask his help. I said, "Hey, I'm getting raped. Can you help me?" You're the headmaster, and that was like it was a whole other level than beyond not reporting.
That's true. That's true. That's why I could go on and on about this case at the same time.
Yeah. I don't know. It's hard to know where to start. For me, the going further back than 1999, which is when you first started looking into this case, but so many, like most of the GBC, all of the GBCs that were in education, but a lot of other GBCs were aware of the situation in Mayapur. It was even back then when the report first came out in 1990. It was sent to all the GBC. It wasn't something. It was like it's not like two people knew, nobody else knew anything. This was going back to 1990. Then again, they were made aware in 99 when you took the case several times, and it was a consistent. And again, everybody looked the other way. For me, the biggest, the most important and most concerning aspect of this case, of looking at Swami's case, is that they all point to failure to protect children in ISKCON. It's not, Bhaktivedanta Purna is not the problem. Looking at Swami is not the problem. They are a product of a system that tolerates child abuse. And we misuse scriptures to, we're very quick to forgive child abusers as a society, and there is so much compassion for these child abusers, and there's zero compassion for the victims. Like there's something so deeply wrong. I don't know. Anyway.
Just to follow up on that for a second, Sanaka. Sorry, you finish if you hadn't completed
Nope.
your
Go ahead, Damodar.
So, as I was listening to you, dear Govinda Prabhu, there's a couple of things going off in my mind. What you're describing at the moment is still 20 plus years ago, and yet it's only just been curtailed now. And so not only have we got a lot of people in Mayapur looking the other way, or even actively facilitating, but obviously lots of friends at an international level in terms of other senior leaders. The other thing that I thought was worth exploring here is, at the moment, we're talking mostly about his denial of even suppression of information about rampant sexual abuse going on for children in his care. There's a couple of other angles as well here. One is a culture of cruel punishment of children, like deriving almost a perverse pleasure in very cruel and painful corporal punishment and so on. And then also what's recently come out, and I think has been the final straw, so to speak, is his own involvement in sexual abuse of minors and other vulnerable people. Multiple victims over extended periods of time, which finally came to the fore. And we gather that there's many more victims than those who've currently reported who may come out. And again, this was known to many people. So this is what's scary. And certainly the angle I would like to explore is, how do we account for child abusers being able to continue like this for so long, uninterrupted, and even with the active endorsement of a lot of their fellows and so on. But look, Dhira Govinda Prabhu, you were, I think, laying out some history there before Sanaka and I came in. So I think you'd kind of got up to some of the reports in 1999 and Maharaj's unwillingness to acknowledge the validity of them and take action and so on. So please, if you're happy to go back to, because we're aware that there's at least 2 CPO rulings against him that are about 20 years old, and somehow he was still active with children and still able to perpetrate more and more harm.
Yes, yeah. Well, the one from 1991, that's more than 30 years old. And then our report came out in 1999, more than 20 years ago. And yeah, so like even what came out in 1991, as you're saying, both Sanaka and Damodar, the GBCs of Mayapur they're aware of that. And Bhaktivedanta Purna Swami, he was removed from connection with children for about a month or 2, and then he's back. And yeah, like it would seem that, you know, whoever was the GBCs at that time, they ought to be asked for some accountability. Like, no, it's like he was under your supervision, and he's supervising, directly committing atrocious prisonable offenses, child abuse. Why is he back there? And then, okay, I hate this. If we go into the Apichat Sudaracho Bhajanti Mamananya. Okay, so then in my interview with Bhaktivedanta Purna Swami in 1990, and I'm not, you know, when I talk about this about anyone, you know, I don't know what's their relationship with Krishna. I don't know, you know, I don't know where they're going after they leave this body. I'm just speaking in terms of kind of like what happened, and responses that are, you know, that are just kind of common sense, protective, and in line with integrity. So then when I interviewed him, and I sent that 1999 April report, this isn't the official decision, the 1999 April report, which in my perspective is more important than the official decision that came out later that year, that I sent that to all the leadership. And it's clear, like, he's just blatantly lying and concealing, like he's got problems, you know, like that. And so like you can't say he's rightly situated. Again, it's not for me to say what's in someone's heart, but no, he's acting in very unbrahminical ways: concealment, deception, lying, and not these lying about children, the stuff he already acknowledged that happened. They say, oh no, they were all consensual. No, it was like hundreds, maybe thousands of instances of violent rape, forced, not same age, and he's just lying about it. Like, no, it's not transcendental, it's not sattvic, it's not brahminical. So, and again, this report is sent to all the ISKCON leadership, and my sense is from like 98 through about 2002, maybe 2004, we did make steps to transform the consciousness around Mayapur. Even things, when I first went there in 98, I could see the children, the Gurukul children, like even they were around the temple, and like the brahmacharis, they were like patting them on the rear, and it was just like, it was just it was a very inappropriate and like very cringeworthy type of behavior, and that changed substantially. Okay, then I'm going to jump forward a bit to
let me ask you a question. Hold on to that thought for a moment,
Sure.
because I'd like to again bring Sanaka back in, but this is a
Yeah.
question to you both. We seem to have 20 or 30 years of ISKCON leaders being alerted or having the opportunity to see what's going on. Even now, after this CPO report has finally, potentially been the nail in the coffin, although we need to look at, how significant we think this report is. We're still seeing the only responses that we're getting from ISKCON leaders are Apichetsu Radhara. Oh, don't be hard on him. Maybe we should fund his retirement, and you should still consider him saintly. This is Krishna's directive to everybody. We're not seeing them denounce child abuse, and this is bewildering to me. How do we account for this lack of responsiveness, or even problem responsiveness, from so many ISKCON leaders? Question to you both. Maybe I'll ask Sanaka to come in first of all.
I don't know. That's the answer. For me, it's interesting because I don't remember when. I know that for many years I wrote many articles on the Sampradaya Sun about Mayapur and different developments and new cases. That anytime I would hear something, I would write. But for me, what really the starting point was when I read this document that Dhira Govinda just mentioned on the report on the 99 on the Gurukul from the 1999, his exchange with Bhaktivedanta Purna Maharaj. I read that document, and for me, just reading that document, it was like, this man, it is not responsible, it is not safe for this man to be around children. It was that was my conclusion, and I didn't know what to do. Is this it? Can you hear me better? People are saying they can't hear me.
I can hear you fine somehow, so I'm not sure what's going on there.
Also, I'm hearing your voice as muddled and muffled. I'm able to understand what you're saying.
Okay.
But
is this any better or no? If I get the mic closer, no. I wonder.
I can hear you fine. I'm not sure what's going on.
Let me try and take out the mic, the headphones. Let's see if that.
Now can't hear a thing. You would need to set up a new microphone on your settings or something. Oh, I had one comment that it was a tiny bit better. I think keep with your.
Can anybody hear me now? Is this
yeah, definitely loud and clear. I can hear you.
But you can hear me clear all the time. Is it still
yeah,
muffled?
I'm not sure what's going on there.
It's muffled.
It's still kind of muffled, yeah.
I can try and get another pair of headphones. That's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, give that a go. We obviously want to make sure we hear your every word.
Okay. You guys continue. I'll be back in a second. I have another pair we can try. That's the best thing I can do.
Thanks, Sanaka, and we'll reload your answers in a moment. But Dhira Govindaji, how do we account for this? I mean, is this a unique ISKCON phenomenon? Is there just general denial in most environments where, abuse comes to light, that people just turn a blind eye? I mean, it seems shocking to me that 20, 30 years of turning a blind eye, especially those who you would expect to act, people in the local vicinity and his leadership peers around the world. I'm at a loss.
I don't have any sort of encouraging response for you. I've expressed to Kamlesh and Gandharbika, I appreciated the report they issued, and maybe Bhaktivedanta Purna Swami will no longer have contact with children in the ISKCON organization. At the same time, I'm not convinced. I'm not really seeing that there's a shift in the culture of consciousness, and it's a consciousness. Again, as Sri Ram expressed more than 30 years ago, there's been a culture of consciousness at least since the late 70s, early 80s around ISKCON Mayapur, and ISKCON more general, but we're focusing on Mayapur here. There's a consciousness that just allows and tolerates in the community, in the schools there, this mistreatment of children, and that's generous. It more encourages it. So back in 98, 99, 2000, I was spending significant time. I would receive letters from ISKCON leadership, including many in the sannyas ashram. And I understand many of them, they were friends, or maybe some of them had received mentorship from Bhaktivedanta Swami. He was very dear to them. And they were writing to me things like, well, look, so if he's prevented from giving Bhagavatam class, or if he's not leading the school, who will that help anyway? Who will that help anyway? It doesn't make any sense. So again, I believe I patiently responded, and I got many letters like that. I could name names who I got them from, but those who were and are prominent ISKCON leaders in sannyas ashram in many cases. So I tried to patiently explain, well, actually, Maharaj, based on my experience in ISKCON and in child protection outside of ISKCON, what you're saying is not really valid. Because, for example, if someone was mistreated and then they see the one who mistreated them sexually or physically or neglected, and they see that person is in the leadership position, then they're oftentimes the wound becomes more severe. They're re-traumatized, to use that term. So I'm saying like okay, I think like I was needing to explain things that my belief is, maybe at least 99 or 99.9% of the residents of Australia or Florida, like, we wouldn't need to explain things like that to them, like that, last time when we were on the podcast about Lokanath Swami, I quoted Bhaktisiddhanta about how non-ecclesiastical criminals would cringe at the criminal behavior that happening within religious organizations. So that's very alive. It's very true here. That someone who is known to abuse children, allow the abuse of children, so recklessly irresponsible, and children are suffering and tortured, and then the next month he's supervising children again, and then it's like we're like on our fifth cycle. So then in the year 2010, well, no, I'm just going to go to the year 2000. This is the year after I had the two taped, recorded interviews with Bhaktivedanta Swami. I wrote the 1999 April report, and I appreciate, Sanaka, that you read that report closely. I wish more would read that report closely. Okay, so then the next year I go back to Mayapur, meeting again with Bhaktivedanta Swami. There were others in the room. The Justice Minister of ISKCON was in that room. That's Shesha Prabhu. And we were talking, and we had an exchange and like that. And I remember from the Justice Minister, really the only thing he mentioned about the investigation was he insisted that I apologize to Bhaktivedanta Swami, because that he just insisted. He demanded that I apologize to Bhaktivedanta Swami because because in the previous year I didn't reveal beforehand to Bhaktivedanta Swami that I had the 1991 report, and the Justice Minister was say you should apologize to Maharaj, which I did not do, because I thought like I was doing my service, and it would seem, if we're concerned about honesty, that this devotee Bhaktivedanta Swami in the Burman, he's been caught in lying, concealing, and this and that. Seems we might be concerned about that. But I'm just trying to convey the consciousness. 2010, I'll give one more chunk here, then I'll pause. 2010, I had not been in the service of Child Protection Office Director for about 6 years. But I would get parents and youth regularly write to me for guidance and advice, to share their frustrations, share their concerns, miseries. In 2010, yeah, I got some indications. I document this in some articles that the title, like the title of one is A Festival of Red Flags. I put it on the internet. So I got some that, like, yeah, in Mayapur, the same stuff is happening, same concerning stuff. All right. And so I was very concerned. I had correspondence with Mahavishnupriya, Mataji, and I wrote to the the International Child Protection Director at that time. At that time was Champakalata Prabhu. We had some exchange, and I have those exchanges like that, and I copied excerpts with them in my Red Flags articles in 2010. And in the exchange, because like she seemed very unaware of, the 1999 report, the 1991 report. So I said, yeah, you seem unaware of this, and that concerned me. And she wrote to me. I have the exact quote here. She wrote, "In my training during the handing over process, I was never informed about what happened in Mayapur." And so, okay, someone's asked me to avoid calling BVP pointers on me. Okay, I hear you. Okay, I hear you. I'm processing that. Thank you. I appreciate and validate your concerns about my use of language there. Okay. So now also in that correspondence, it became clear, because there were reports about what was happening in Mayapur then, some abusive things towards children. And then the Mayapur CPT director, the Child Protection Team Director for Mayapur, I received reports. He was quoted as, because he was asked, like, because like I wrote, like, well, especially considering the history in Mayapur, this really concerns me. This is like not just one red flag. This is a festival of red flags. And so he was quoted as responded. He said, what history in Mayapur? There were some boys playing. Boys play. Boys do that. So again, it's just like hundreds of incidents of violent rape. With it's dozens and dozens of boys suffering, tortured. And so the one who's meant to be most responsible, the Child Protection Team Director in Mayapur, but most responsible, most informed, most knowledgeable, he's saying there was some boys playing. So that's again, like again, if this were to go to any sort of like secular child protection investigator, they would say, like, yeah, this isn't just foolishness. Like, no, there's something very deliberate and intentional happening here. Okay. And then the International Child Protection Director, she said, "Oh, my training didn't include anything. Was there something happening in Mayapur?" I remember I published the first Red Flags article on some internet site, and a few days later, I went to I was at the ISKCON of Alachua Sunday Feast program. I was just hanging out at the Sunday Feast program, and a member of the community, it was Pushkar Prabhu. Maybe some of you know Pushkar. He's a well-known painter, well-known artist. Okay, and he and I are friends for many years. Our daughters were the same age, played together. They're still friends. So Pushkar came to me and said, I saw your article. And Pushkar said, the international director said it wasn't part of her training to hear about Mayapur. Now that was just at the time when the big BP oil spill, the worst oil spill in the history of the planet happened in the Gulf of Mexico, BP oil. So Pushkar said, that would be like if the new CEO of BP oil was asked, how are you dealing with the oil spill in the Gulf? And he were to say, oil spill in the Gulf? What oil spill in the Gulf? So it was like very, I thought it was a very apropos. Okay. Like it would be like, yeah, like what oil spill in the Gulf? And then I'll just close for now. I have a lot, I could go on and on about this because just I've used that term, the crazy making of it. And crazy making sort of, that can be like, but it's just the apparent dark, sinister nature of the systemic twisted consciousness is just shocking. It leaves me aghast. So then just in reading the more recent files, like, you know, in reading the more recent files, I could see that like in 2015, by 2015, there was no child protection team in Mayapur. I guess they figured like, well, I guess generally we can understand, you know, it's helpful to have a child protection team, but considering how in this community, there's never been any problem with that. That's when I read the more recent files coming out, because again, coming out from the Child Protection Office, it's just like okay, it's one thing like maybe there are ISKCON communities where there hasn't been any reports or any incidents, and maybe a little slack on child protection team, and okay, it's not good, but in Mayapur, like, no, this is egregious, extensive. This is just tragedy after cover up of tragedy. And it's like, oh yeah, we just let the child protection team disband. Oh, well, we had a child protection team. And anyhow, the director of the child protection team said, what happened in the past was, it was just child's play. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. I'm going to make just 3 very quick points, and then I'd like to get back to Sanaka. And I'd also like to tackle with a whole bunch of the comments that we're getting. We're getting a lot of comments. So just very quickly, you were known as a fairly robust CPO director, and you've already cited that between you and the current CPO directors, there was a couple who are, to say it in generous terms, not known for being robust. Possibly even known for being very accommodating of the preferences of the ISKCON leadership generally. What I notice now that we actually have a more robust CPO who's prepared to call out ISKCON leaders and drive things, is we're instantly hearing that their heads are being called for. You know, that there are various GBC leaders who are saying, these people aren't qualified, we disagree with their conclusions, and so on. One of the other things that struck me at the moment as to why we get so much GBC silence is they have just given a free pass to Lokanath Swami. So here we see that the CPO handled the Bhakti Vidyapurna case, and now he's being removed. But that was absolutely, you know, kept from them. The final point I'd like to make, and then pass to Sanat. You mentioned how the leaders fraternizing and people still giving class sends all the wrong kind of signals. And we've certainly had a lot of disciples of leaders being very sensitive to their you know, favorite sadhu being called out for maintaining a friendship. I remember I even had a friend of mine who was a little bit sore that I'd criticized his participation in a Lokanath big festival at Govardhan, because he just sees it. I'm innocently talking about Prabhupada, and why would you people choose to make anything of that? And yet what this is doing is obviously lending legitimacy to these folks. Anyway, so those are just a few things I wanted to capture from what you were saying, Dhira. But back to you, Sanaka. We're still trying to get our heads around why the sluggish response from ISKCON's leadership. Why is it that ISKCON's leadership doesn't either perceive what it is that's happening here, what it needs to do, or is too sentimental towards their friend? What is going on?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Is it clear? Better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Very much better.
Good. So no headphones. Okay. I just going back to where I left off before, I just wanted to say that for me, just reading that document, which is quite a long document that Govinda just mentioned, when I read that document, for me, I was 110% convinced this man, it is irresponsible to allow this man to be around children. He poses a danger to children. It's reckless, and it's just not safe to have. That's all I needed to. I didn't know any, and that it presents enough, but it's only a fraction of the actual magnitude of the problem. And then over the years, I wrote different articles that went on the Sampradaya Sun. They were pretty mostly didn't get anywhere with that. And then in 2014, I've been actually thinking about it for some time. I said maybe disrupting a class would at least get some attention on the issue. And then by chance, I found out the day before, tomorrow Bhaktivedanta Purna Swami is giving class at the Manor. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not ready. I called a friend who is a bit of a rebel. His name is Suresh. He's been around the devotees for a long time in London, and he was super excited. I was like, yeah, man, let's do it. So we went down and we did that. And for me, the thing is. And then it's interesting because Bhaktivedanta Purna, in that exchange, Bhaktivedanta Purna talks a lot about etiquette and, this is not the right forum and all these things. And for me, from my perspective, was we got a fire in the house. The Gurukul is on fire. Everybody knows that the Gurukul is on fire. Everybody's looking at the other way. I could care less whether this is the right forum. This is an emergency of such severity that if this is what it takes, this is what I'll do. And I knew that there was a chance that they would kick me out from the Manor. Somehow it didn't happen. Instead, they banished Bhaktivedanta Purna Maharaj from the Manor. But it's like going back to, I'm going back and forth. There's so much to say. There's something I want to mention. Along with reading that article, I also read another article.
For those who are listening, just so they're clear, when you say the article, you're talking about the April 1999 report on the Bhaktivedanta Gurukul Village. Just so the listeners are, just so they're April 1999.
The report on the Bhaktivedanta Gurukul Village. Yes. I also read another article written by a Gurukuli girl called Maharani. She went to Gitanagari Gurukul. I don't actually know her, but it was on Chakra, and I think it's dated 2003. And that article is like she is expressed. It's so prophetic, that article. She's expressing her disbelief. She says Bhaktivedanta Purna Swami just got banned from being in the Gurukul, and he's back a short while later. He's back here as if nothing happened. She says whatever else might be going on, which we're not aware of right now. She says his past is sufficient that this person should not be around children. And then you mentioned the Mayapur CPT. She quotes something from a devotee who was serving in the Mayapur CPT at the time. His name is Janudvipa Das. He is, I think he's from Denmark. I think he still lives in Mayapur. So the quote is quoting from, this is the CPT guy in Mayapur. He says, the real enemy in ISKCON is not child abuse, the GBC, the fallen gurus, or the dubious sannyasis. They are not the enemy. The real enemies are those who use all these controversial issues to cast doubt on Srila Prabhupada and his followers. So this was the CPT guy. Another CPT devotee, he was actually a good one. His name is, anyway, I won't mention his name. but he actually, they sent him to the hospital. They found him in a corner and they beat him and they sent him to the hospital. And that's why there wasn't much CPT in Mayapur. It was like it's a health hazard. For a while, Madhava Gauranga himself was the head of child protection in Mayapur. So you can imagine that while Madhava Gauranga was there were no incidents of child abuse reported in the Maharaj's Gurukul somehow or other. Nothing happened.
Yeah, and so what we have to understand is this lack of willingness to recognize what's going on and intervene basically resulted in 20 more years of generations of children suffering. We haven't yet even talked about horrific physical abuse, cruel punishments that could have only been dreamt up by a very strange mind. And Maharaj's own involvement in direct sexual abuse and so on. So the fact is, because the red flags were not recognized, because there was no action taken, many more people suffered. And we're talking about lifelong consequences. There are people who don't seem to understand that cruel physical punishment is every bit as damaging as sexual violation on a child's psyche and so on. Some people just think, oh yeah, that's not real abuse. But this was horrific, and this was probably there are probably more victims, notwithstanding that there are many victims of sexual abuse that Maharaj could have intervened or directly perpetrated. There are more victims of just the cruelty. I'd like to take some comments, and I think these might direct our conversation for a little while. But then I'd like us to come back and see what other loose ends there are. So I'm going backwards in terms of the time they were posted. Yeah, so someone just mentioning there that maybe we be careful about names. That being said, we have a question here around. So this I think is talking about the responsibility of particular individuals, heads of security of Mayapur, and invariably the wife who was the head of the Mayapur school. Do we want to say anything about the extent to which we regard people like them as victims, because their testimony is actually part of the current case, when they're also potentially implicated in other ways themselves directly? And I believe there's even some CPO cases involved there. So let's deal with that in principle. Views on how we might see people that Maharaj directly engaged to assist.
I mean, my personal there's a few things that in reading the testimony of the principal of the girls' school and of her husband, to me it appears that they were a victim of some degree of a high degree of sexual abuse. Madhava Gauranga, he is the husband of the principal. He was this victim of sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse when he was a child in Gurukul. I think maybe he was well-meaning. I don't know. What certainly happened later on is that he became an enabler. He enabled, he covered up, he defended the abuse of Bhaktivedanta Purna Maharaj, Bhaktivedanta Purna, Anirdesh Bapu Das. Same with his wife, Sri Radhe. She was very young when she first moved to the Gurukul. She was 19 years old. There is a significant age difference between Bhaktivedanta Purna and Sri Radhe. There was an imbalance of power, and he was the kind of the guru figure. It's at the same time, it's also from the documents I've read, I have exchanged some communication with some of the more recent victims. And I've also read the 2015 report and all these and the 2007 report, and all these documents, they point to, they paint a picture of an exceptionally manipulative person. I'm referring to Sri Radha. If you read the early reports on Bhaktivedya Purna and Sri Radha's inappropriate interactions, as you read, you get the impression that Sri Radha might be the one manipulating Bhaktivedya Purna. It's really not clear what kind of relationship it was. It's a really strange thing, which I don't know what happened between them. It's hard for me to say it was this or it was that. What is clear to me is that even if we say yes, they are victims, Sri Radha Madhuranga, that doesn't negate or excuse or certainly take responsibility for the abuse they personally perpetrated, they enabled, and they defended. So they are 100%, in my book, they stand 100% responsible for the abuse that they perpetrated, committed, enabled, and defended. That, so they are both. And that's kind of what I'll say for now.
Anything to add to that, Dhira Govinda?
I appreciate what Sanaka shared. It sounds complete in the principles he expressed. And again, I've had no direct involvement in these cases. I kind of brought closure to my child protection director service in 2004, many years, before these. But the principle is there, and it's I like how Sanaka expressed it, because it's unfortunately it's common that's someone who was abused as a child, then they'll and this happened a lot in Mayapur, then they'll either quickly or a year or two later, then they'll abuse younger children who they're more powerful than, or when they become adults. And as Sanaka said, and then, we're each responsible for our actions, right? The past can explain a lot about the present, but it doesn't take responsibility for it. At the same time, it's a consideration that we don't want. It's a consideration that we don't want to be callous to. That if they were abused in the institution, it's a consideration to consider and process and factor in, and at the same time, we're each responsible for our actions and the results of our actions.
Thank you. I'm going to keep working through the comments. So there's an explanation here, someone citing an anecdote from Prabhupada Leelamrita, talking about how even when you alert somebody to danger, sometimes denial or even objection is the response. It's just possibly a part of human nature. That's why I want to keep stressing the grim price that's been paid by generations of children when others were just a little uncomfortable about what they were hearing. And especially leaders who failed to intervene, who failed to act, when their duty was clearly to take action, and so on. I'll see if you've got any comments on that, but otherwise I'll keep moving through the comments. I'm not sure. This one needs a purport. I'm not sure if that's playful. I'm not sure if that's accusatory. We certainly do get plenty of objections to what we're doing here on Vedic Inquirer, as if we're the antichrists, just bringing out all the worst aspects of the movement's history, as if there's no legitimacy to any of that. You might be able to see who the comment was made by, Sanaka, if you look on the thread itself, but that's come up here. Mr. Tumnus might have a concern about, implication here, but I think fawning in general, fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, FAWN, is understood to be classic responses. And maybe in our culture, let's respect sadhus and so on. It's even a glorified behavior, the submissive regard for others, and not, what does Prabhupada say? according to Vedic culture, a senior shouldn't even be offered a verbal argument, which is why Arjuna was hesitant to take on Bhishma and Drona on the Battle of Kurukshetra. Obviously, Krishna instantly dispelled those illusions and told him to go ahead. In fact, that was actually the basis of Apichet Sudharacharo. It's very clear from Prabhupada's purport that he's saying, sometimes in the course of discharging your devotional service, you may contravene some political or social function, and that might be regarded abominably in mundane society. He's not saying, by the way, you're covered if you fiddle with kids. That's not what Krishna is saying. I think I was joking earlier that Krishna might well, feel like he wants to descend and clarify a few things for people. Anyway, any comments on thorning, just as a general explanation of why inaction is taken?
Yeah, well, fawning is not leadership.
Yeah. Dhritarashtra, definitely lots of people following out of his playbook.
Yeah, fawning will just fawning. Basically, it's my need for adoration and distinction and popularity. I just want to belong to the club. That's the important thing. And so so fawning, because of my need for belonging, my need for you to like me, for my need to keep my position, my need to just keep my place, that like that in the society, then I'm contributing to perpetuating evil.
I often think that this resort to Apichet Sudharachara, obviously not knocking what Krishna's saying, there's a very, very important principle to be understood there. But I think it's sometimes, a form of bypassing where it's the only thing I can think of out of the entire body of work of Vedic literature that seems to have something to say about these things. And I want to demonstrate that I'm in touch with Krishna's words. As you say, there's definitely some virtue signaling. I want to demonstrate that I'm thinking transcendentally. So I'm going to go for the only quote I can think of right now. And that is, we're just going to forgive this guy.
Okay, look. And I've been saying this since 1998 when I, accepted the responsibility to direct the ISKCON Child Protection Office. That because Apichet. So even if one determines that someone's rightly situated, even if, and that's the big if, even if that someone determines, so someone could be rightly situated, and the Apichet Sudharacharo verse, maybe it does apply. So someone could be rightly situated and they should spend time in prison. It's not like, well, either they're rightly situated or they certainly be punished. No, it's this and that. So, sometimes I might genuinely think that someone has become rightly situated and they should spend time in prison for their own rectification, for their own further development of virtuous qualities, for the message that society sends. So I'm just saying, even if there's no contradiction between that there should be consequences, rectification for so many reasons, for basic the message that the society sends, for the integrity of Prabhupada's movement, for the healing the wounds of those who were victimized. And someone might be rightly situated. Now, in the case that we're talking about here, Bhakti Vijayaporna, again, like anyone in leadership, they got even before the 1991 report, the letters from Sri Ram directed to leaders, the 1991 report. So no one who had this, the basic level of principled living, of decency, of ethics, of morals, that again 99.9% of the citizens of Florida or Australia have. Anyone who just had any common sense or sense, who was connected in some principled way, they wouldn't allow this person to be in connection with children in any institutional way, or informal or informal. And then, And then, but he's rightly situated. Then in 1999, he's caught lying, concealing, deceiving again and again, deceiving about his defeat, concealing about that, and just like, how can you? But then, so, and then, and I appreciate it. So, you said you read that April 1999 report. It's clear this person, sure, yeah, we should care about everyone. We should care about Bhaktivinoda Puri. Sure, we should care. How can we? Is the way to care about him to continue to give him access to perpetuate these tragedies? It's not caring about him. It's not caring about children. Not caring about Prabhupada's society. So, so again, there's such layers of misuse, and I appreciate your clarifications of Krishna's intended meaning there. That in the course of our duty, there's some transgressions, but abusing children and severe, wicked, physical, sexual abuse and overseeing it, not doing anything, the sadism of it, that's not in the course of our duty. And again, whatever it was, even if someone is yes, and still you're rightly situated, that doesn't mean that he should be giving a Bhagavatam class in front of those who he maltreated.
Well, it's been weaponized, and it's been weaponized to say, don't you talk about it, as in even talking about. Krishna doesn't say don't talk about it. Yeah. You must forgive him. You must instantly regard him as saintly. Krishna is basically saying, I will not send you to an eternal lake of fire. I will not disown you. Yeah. You know, get yourself resituated or whatever it is, and you know, you're good. Yes, Prabhupada says don't deride a person for an accidental fall down, but also understand if someone's doing this repeatedly, they're not a high devotee, i.e. sitting on the Vyasasan, giving the class, held up in an honorable position, being a guru. Nowhere does Krishna say, yeah, Guru eva samantavya, you know, that's fine. I mean, no disqualification there. It's craziness, like you said, crazy making, to just say, you must forgive, no action. He should be evading all consequences. In fact, he should get a retirement package. Sanaka, anything to say on this before we move to another comment?
Yeah, I think the oftentimes there's a lot of oftentimes when this verse is quoted in the context of the abuse of Vaishnava children, the people who weaponize this verse, who in my view, they have a very poor understanding of the verse at best, but they conflate an accidental fall down with this physical or sexual abuse of a Vaishnava child. Now, if you look at the Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy, the history, the scriptures, these are two very different things. So a fall down would be consensual sex between two adults. So if Bhaktivinoda Puri had gone to see prostitutes, that would be an accidental fall down. Or if he went there regularly, that would be a regular fall down, whatever you want to call it. But if you look at the story of Jagai and Madai, or Ambarish Maharaj and Durvasa Muni, Durvasa Muni's offense was verbal. He didn't beat him. He certainly didn't go beyond that. Madai's offense was physical. He threw a clay pot and he hit Lord Nityananda on the head. And in the case of, in the pastime of Durvasa Muni, Lord Narayan himself said, "I cannot help you. There is nothing I can do for you. You have to go and get the forgiveness from Ambarish Maharaj." Lord Narayan said, "Oh, he didn't say, oh, Api Ched Sudaracharo, we're all good, buddy. Don't worry about it. It's all." It's fine. It's not what he said. He said, I myself, the Supreme Personality of God, I cannot help you because you offended one of my devotees. There's nothing I can do. So to say, and then the same, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came on the scene, he called the Sudarshan Chakra, he was ready to kill Jagai and Madai. That was his response. It wasn't until the offended party offered their forgiveness that the offense was canceled. You cannot the prescribed atonement in Shastra for Vaishnava Parad is very different than the prescribed atonement for a fall down. The consequences are different. They're not comparable. You can't have them in the same conversation. They're not the same thing. Nowhere near, not even close. So to me, it comes across as some kind of philosophical and intellectual dishonesty. This conflating these two. It's like, how is it a fall down? This is like a physical sexual aggression. It's a criminal act. It's not a mere slip up where you say, oh, it just involves you and your own sadhana and your relationship with Krishna. When there is the sexual abuse of a child by an authority, like we've seen in the case of Bhakti Vidyapurna, you have this, you've destroyed. Maybe destroyed is a strong word, but potentially you have destroyed the faith of the child, the faith of the family, the faith of the community. It's like it is something abused on so many levels that to say, oh, it's all good, he's rightly situated as a saintly person. There's nothing saintly about abusing Vaishnava children. I don't know what. I've said what I need to say.
Well, and here, we have a comment that sort of puts it in perspective. While you were all looking the other way and considering him saintly and rightly situated, you gave him an extra 20 years of enacting abuse. So I really hope that we can purge the movement in general, leaders, of this misconception that we just have to see the good in other people, especially when it's your duty to act. Let's face it, Grandfather Bhishma, Mahajan, and still he had to be put to death because he failed to protect Draupadi when the chips were down.
We're also one thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
My friend, something that my friend Suresh from London, he said a few times is he tells me, he says, my butcher and my, no, he's vegetarian, but he says the butcher down the road and my mechanic, they understand that child abuse is wrong. That is, it's unacceptable. There is no place where it's okay to do that. And yet we have the leadership of the society that is supposed to have the highest philosophy in the world, and they're all saying, "Oh, it's not so bad. It's okay. It wasn't a big deal." Another big one that I hear is, "Oh, he hasn't offended anybody in 10 years." Like, well, that's that you know of. We might. That's what people were saying 20 years ago, and then that just allowed them to continue offending. Anyway, it's just shocking on so many levels.
Maybe this will wake up some of the gurus and peers that have failed to act, is that even their own disciples are going, I can't reconcile this. Why is my guru not acting? Why did he show much support for the individual and so on? And maybe that's what it'll take. It will actually take sort of mass defection or something. Let's keep working our way through. Hypnotic state. There is actually a really interesting quote I remember from the Archbishop of Canterbury about sometimes priests being so heavenly minded they're of no earthly use. So this idea that if you're an ISKCON leader and you actually can't take decisive action, what are you doing occupying that seat? By all means, go and read your scripture if you've got no taste to get your hands dirty, but goodness me. I'll pause. I think, Sanaka, you want to come in on this one?
To me, it's something that I've said for a long time, is that if anybody who takes the trouble to do an in-depth study of the history of child protection and child abuse in ISKCON you're really going to struggle to view the leadership in good light. You cannot do a comprehensive study, research into how it's been handled and come out on the other end and say, yeah, these guys, they're upstanding people. They really put in a good effort to protect their children. It's just not possible. What I cannot attribute motive, so I cannot say whether this was intentional or it was certainly willful. Willful in the sense it was certainly a willful neglect, or a knowing neglect. I'm going to use the word knowing neglect. So I don't want to attribute motive, but what I will say is that attacking the children is the best and most effective way to ensure that you undermine the movement of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because you are chopping the legs of the future. That is the outcome. Whether that was intentional, obviously, I cannot say, but the outcome is that this is how severe the outcome is.
Well, it is shocking, and thinking about leaders of Prabhupada's movement who've taken up the mantle post Srila Prabhupada's departure, you would think that the right environment for future generations born in the society would be a core strategy. It's one thing to be excited about, new converts, and maybe most of the followers of our current generation of gurus and leaders are converts. But then if you've actually got indifference and willful ignorance towards, the people born in the movement, that to me it's shocking. It's incredible. Dhira Govinda, anything to add on this before we move to our next comment?
I just thought I want to read something quick about fawning from Leo Tolstoy.
Oh.
Leo Tolstoy wrote, "Nothing distorts life and robs us of true happiness as much as the habit of living not according to wise teachings and our own conscience, but for the approval of those around us." And he goes on, "One of the greatest causes of evil in life is our deep-seated desire for the approval of others. More than any other temptation, this desire leads us away from the truly good life because it turns us away from our true self, the self that is capable of attaining goodness. For the sake of this desire, people sell their souls, as it were, because they replace their inner life with another imaginary life that they feel is acceptable to others, yet is wholly foreign to their true being." Leo Tolstoy.
I did comment on a thread of Malati's earlier today where she was expressing some regret around the leadership's handling of these child protection matters. And I was saying, the GBC and ISKCON's leadership has been dealing with a gradual erosion of credibility for decades. But its mishandling of these two cases, recent cases, Lokanath and Bhaktivinoda Purna, that's sent it into complete freefall. Because how do we reconcile this with properly situated, spiritually enlightened leaders? They're failing on even the basic human instinct to protect the young.
Yeah.
And they've gone off into abstract philosophy land where, I'll just quote a Bhagavad Gita shloka and my job is complete, as opposed to let me take decisive action to protect, these young people who are entrusted to our care.
That's even animal instinct. It's not. You don't even need to be human.
Well, that's why I feel it's so heavenly minded, no earthly use. We've actually become so world negating that our instinct, I'm not saying me or you, but the instinct of so many people is to quote a Bhagavad Gita verse. That's it. Done. Job done. We've quoted the verse. And not actually realize, you could say that the whole message of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna had all of these sophisticated reasons why he wasn't sure that the fighting was necessary and maybe we should not give it up. And Krishna's practically his first chastisement. We often hear it's not that body, but he said, look, you're quoting learned words, but you're actually mourning about something that learned people should not be mourning about. And so it's very scary when someone thinks that their job is complete by quoting a verse and is actually not prepared to do the necessary work of leadership. And they all have blood on their hands.
Well, yeah, Sanaka used that term in what you wrote to Shivaram Swami, that they have blood on their hands. Yeah, I appreciate you using that term, Damodar, world rejecting, because Vaishnavism, what we get from Prabhupada, it's so world embracing. It's the actual Bhakti Yoga, the actual Krishna, it's so not world rejecting, it's world embracing. And of course, it's cultivating the consciousness to be able to respond to all aspects of human nature, all the complexity of life in a way where our response deepens our enthusiasm for true bhakti. But yeah, it's so intrinsically world embracing, and so that's why it's what you're describing so much clashes with what Prabhupada actually gave us.
I've got the quote up here now about mafia. I have to recall when I first got involved in the Lokanath campaign, and this was just over a year ago, maybe 18 months ago, I found myself immediately taken off the class roster. So apparently he's got no restrictions, but if you talk about him, then you might end up with restrictions. And it actually reminded me of a little clip from The Godfather where one of them surreptitiously approaches the, I have a pebble in my shoe. In other words, there's somebody I need you to take out for me. It's causing me some irritation. All right. People afraid to rock the boat. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of cowardice, moral cowardice. Pedophiles always frighten children to keep silent and then cover up. Yeah, so echoing a lot of what we've said so far. People saying maybe when it actually comes to losing some of their own privileges, power and money, maybe that's when the leaders will finally take action. We're certainly trying to help them appreciate the degree of their mistakes, and we certainly hope people will share these kind of things so it actually adds to the collective pressure. Yeah, maybe they'll only take action when there's legal repercussions. Someone's saying here, maybe we're too ready to Shakshadhari Tvena Samasta Shastra, so how could we possibly, there are things like Vaishnavera Kriya Mudra Vigaya Navuja, don't try to understand a Vaishnav. Are these things also misused to make somebody untouchable? Comfort zones. A lot of comments about Sanaka's mic, which sounds like it's been fixed. Classic paedophile ring. Why would we assume because we're a transcendental society that we're immune to these kind of things?
And again, I think an hour and a half ago, I said the case file in Mayapur, if you put it on a desk, have just a typical child protective investigator professional who's good at their profession, they would say, this looks like what Surabi Kunja Devi Dasi is saying, a typical pedophile ring. That's what I'm not saying it is, but that's what your typical investigator would say if they examine the file. That's true.
Krishna help us indeed. Someone talking about start of a series. There is actually a little bit of a series, and yes, I suspect this won't be the last one on BVP. Why did so? So let's talk a little bit. I think this is a really big one. Let's talk a little bit about the damage that's done when so many other maybe sentimental leaders, thinking first and foremost about their friendship with an abuser, continue to extend hospitality, invitations to speak, sitting on the Vyasasan, worship. Because sometimes people get very sensitive. Oh, it's so unfair that you've shown a picture of my Guru Maharaj with, you know, someone who is an abuser, as if somehow, you know, their endorsement of the person or their friendship with the person is not an issue. Do we have any views on this?
Dear Govinda, Prabhu, you want to go?
Well, I mean, you know, I shared that for many cases when I was CPO director, and certainly including this one, Bhakti Vijayapoina, yeah, I would receive I would receive a lot of letters from friends. I would receive a lot of letters from their friends or people who maybe like received a lot of value that they considered Bhakti Vijayapoina as their mentor. And I can appreciate, I can empathize with that. Like, there's natural human tendency to have some bias towards our friends, like that. And then, okay, so I can appreciate that. At the same time, like, we don't want in our service or like in that as an organization, as a society, that we make decisions based on sentimental sense of friendship, and that sentimentality is going to lead to violating the integrity of Prabhupada's movement, going to lead to more horrific abuse and wounding of children and destruction of families. So I spent a lot of time responding to such comments, and sometimes they were civil and respectful. Sometimes they were maybe angry at me, like, how dare I process the case of this saintly person? And so I would respond based on what I regarded as principle, showing understanding. I hear this person's very dear to you, and according to the evidence, this person did that, and this and that, and so it seems that in civilized society there would be at least some truth revealed and some consequences, and to support the healing of those who were victimized, and to support the perpetrator in their own transformation, healing. So we can empathize with that, but we don't want our decisions to be based on sentimentality.
There's so much sentimentality. It's I remember when the Cost of Silence came out, I got letters from so many people, public, some private. But the essence of these letters was, I stand 100% for child protection, but why did you go after my favorite abuser? It's like, why did you have to focus on him? And it's like, these are like, it's like, if you're only in favor of child protection when it comes at no emotional or personal cost to you, then you're not really for child protection. You have child protection is secondary. You will protect children if it doesn't inconvenience you, or if it doesn't put you in a position where maybe you have to reconsider some, even perhaps big life decisions and choices that you've made, or judgments of certain people. And I understand that if that's your guru, it can be really difficult. But for me, it was like, why are you upset at me? I'm simply describing the activities and choices that your guru has made. I didn't do that. He did it. Get upset with him. But somehow I was the bad guy because I was bringing it up. But that's okay. I didn't have an issue with that. It's like, if we apply, so essentially it's some kind of like somebody said in the comments, mafia kind of justice. It's like, yeah, you can get everybody except my friends. And of course, if we did apply that policy, then we wouldn't get anybody, because every child abuser has some friends who are going to invariably come and rally to his support or her support and their defense. So then, we can only get the child abusers that don't have friends. It's just complete insanity. Regarding what you were saying, the actual question that sparked this conversation, recently I had an exchange with a devotee. His name is Madhavananda Prabhu. He's a disciple of Guru Govinda Maharaj. He's a respected devotee. I met him once. He's a very kind and gentle devotee, and he likes to hang out with some notorious known child abusers in ISKCON. And it was a Facebook exchange, and he was kind of making the point that you made, objecting why I should have the freedom to choose who I associate with. Now, I don't want to misquote him, but he deleted the whole thread, so I'm gonna do my best to paraphrase. But what he was saying was, I don't want anybody to tell me who I can associate with. And I tried to make the point. It's like, nobody can tell you who you're going to associate with. You're free to choose who you want to associate with. You're not free from the consequences of your choices. So as given that you are a person in good standing in the community, well respected and widely respected, if you fraternize with known serious child abusers, what you're doing is you are putting the currency of your good standing in you're vouching for this person. You're saying this person is somebody that I approve of. This person is trustworthy. It's like, I might not know this guy, but I know you and I trust you. And because you trust him, I'm also going to trust him. And that's what happened with Bhaktivedanta Purna Maharaj. People, so many leaders who knew that he was not a person to be trusted with children, they supported him, they fraternized with him, they did not object to his continued involvement with children. And the outcome was that where we are now, where so many more children have been abused unnecessarily, or I don't know if you can say unnecessarily, but it's always unnecessary, but it's certainly, it was preventable. It was so, and that's the most heartbreaking thing for me. It was so obvious, it was so preventable. And that is why I told Shiram Swami, you have blood in your hands, and so many other devotees have blood on their hands.
Yeah, I mean, I have to confess, I was definitely one of those people that was probably a little protesting initially about cost of silence, like simultaneously seeing the importance. And then and I think this comment here really captures it, that devotees are often just disturbed by some of that content, especially if it reframes how they're looking at a particular holy person. I have to say, I came to realize that was a problem mindset that I had. Yes, facing the horror is necessary. I'm just going to look at some of the other comments at the other end of the thread. We probably have a few more. I would then like to explore another potential misconception, which is some people are feeling like, yes, sexual abuse is one thing, but the physical beatings is another. In Bhaktivedanta Purna's case, he's done both, but we should not in any means downplay cruel punishment of children entrusted to that person's care and so on. Just quickly, other ones, just indicating there's a lot of people who have done these things. Someone saying, yes, the age of the internet, it can't be hidden anymore.
On this, I just want to say that I remember one of the first times that I went to Mayapur. No, probably it was no. It wasn't the first time I went to Mayapur. It was after that. It was probably 95, 96. I'm not sure. I went to Mayapur, and I'd been in Mayapur Gurukul briefly in 93. So it was sometime after that. So I knew all the boys there. When I arrived in Mayapur, the boys in the quote unquote Maharaj's boys, that's what they were called, because he had a whole group of Brahmin boys that did the mantras and this and that. So all these guys were up in arms because a Gurukula boy had come forward saying that Bhaktivedanta Purna had sexually abused them. Now, this just came back to mind because recently I got hold of these 1991 documents, and this is in there. So the sexual abuse allegations against Bhaktivedanta Purna Maharaj, I first heard of them in 1995. And I just found out that they were actually documented. So it's up until recently that for some reason that had completely escaped my mind. And I remember having an exchange with one of these boys, and he was like, I cannot believe that this guy he's saying that Maharaj sexually abused him. He's mad. It's not true. It's not possible. And I said, if it's not true, there's nothing to worry about. Why are you so worked up? I don't remember the exchange I had, but the really important point is that these allegations, that's how far back they go. And recently I found out that there is altogether 4 boys, they're now adults, who have over the years, who have accused Bhaktivedanta Purna Maharaj of sexually abusing them. And this goes back to the late 80s, early 90s. I'm somewhere around there. That's how far back he started his career of sexual abuse. He was abusing boys. Then when he got to girls' school, he started abusing the girls. Yeah.
Now, apart from the tragedy of individual lives, which of course is the biggest area of significance, we have to recognize, and this is what is bewildering that ISKCON leaders don't appreciate, is that this brings the entire society into disrepute. And as we can see here, people are naturally saying none of these people could possibly be saints or properly situated. Now, what kind of disservice is that to Prabhupada? That inaction on things of such obvious moral urgency leads people to reject the entire movement.
Yeah, and okay, those in positions of leadership, and as far as like who was particularly in positions of leadership for Mayapur in 1990-91, it's easy to find out these things. I maybe said 1 or 2 names here, and some of them 30 years later are still in positions of leadership. They've been informed about egregious child sexual abuse, and they've continued to let we're saying the same things, and so some of the viewers made comments. So I know I remember one international GBC meeting. I think it was the year 2001, and I was discussing with some members of ISKCON leadership, and we were talking about, well, like those who were like supervising the abuse, and they had knowledge and they didn't do anything, or they even facilitated it, and they're in positions. And the response I got, not from everyone, but the response I got from many in ISKCON leadership was, well, okay, if you process a case against him, do you know how many disciples he has? And I've already shared with this on some of your podcasts, Damodar, and I didn't know what to say. Like, I don't know how many. Like, why should that even matter? We're talking about protecting children and preserving, protecting, maintaining the integrity of Prabhupada's movement. And like, if we act according to principle and we act according to true dharma and virtue, then obviously that's going to be auspicious. And what? So like, just the thought of like, but that was the mentality. Maybe still is, that like whether to process something, like what will that mean financially? What will that mean for the media? If how many disciples? We need to conceal this at all costs. So that's what we often ran into when we talked about processing cases of those who were, well, I gave the example of like the university president of Penn State. He didn't commit abuse, but he went to prison. That would be like if that same principle was processed, there'd be many ISKCON leaders, including those who are worshipped as non-different from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in prison for much more egregious neglect than the university president of Penn State. Yes, Sanaka mentioned something about the boys or something. I thought to share one thing. This was in, say, it was either 1999 or the year 2000. It was either my first or second year in Mayapur, visiting Mayapur, during the time of the international meetings, in my capacity as Child Protection Office Director. And so, and it directly relates to this case, Bhakti Vijayapoina. And so I was invited to a meeting to discuss the case of Bhakti Vijayapoina. So I said, okay. So this was my ISKCON Mayapur. It's evening, I know, maybe about 6 p.m., 7 p.m. So I knock on the door. I found the room in the building, and the door opens. Okay, and there's one bare light bulb hanging from the ceiling, and there's a chair, and there are about 50 young men there, about 50, like, okay, and about 50, like maybe in their teens, late teens, 20s, and there's a chair. So okay, so I sit down, and they talk to me because, like, how come you're processing the case of? How come you're processing this case? And they were not. They were not in a humorous. They were not in a humorous mood. So I responded to their questions, and they like that, and I was not harmed. Anyhow, and because for some he was the official ISKCON guru. For all of them, he was this revered mentor, and I just shared, and I did my best to show understanding of their concerns, their anger, like that. So I just want to fast forward about 15 years later, 2014 or 2015. I was in, I'll just call it, I mean, I reside in Florida, but I was in another state in the I was in kind of the western part of the United States. I was invited to go there to conduct some university presentation on my Mahamantra studies, my university Mahamantra studies. And then while I was there, I got an invitation through my host that someone wanted to host me. Someone in this place in the United States wanted to meet me and host me. I said, okay. I didn't recognize the name, but okay. All right. So I got there, and it was in kind of the suburbs of this USA city. I got there, and I go, and so there's an Indian-bodied young middle, like maybe in his 30s, Indian-bodied. His wife's there, and it's like it's a nice home. It's a nice home. And I still am not recognizing him, but he looked like very, very gentle, very, very gentle and friendly. I come into his home, and I'm invited. Hello, Hare Krishna. But all the Vaishnava marking. And then he explains to me that group of 50, that he was in the group of 50 in 1999, the year 2000. He was 17 years old at the time. They're in Mayapur, and now it's like 15 years later. He's in his 30s. He's got a family. He's got his career, like that. And he said he was one of those. And he said they were ready to beat me up. They were ready to beat me up. Somehow the way I responded, they decided not to do violence to me. And he said that he shared, it touched my heart. He said he very much admires me and appreciates me, and he said that because he was standing, like, in his eyes I was his villain attacking his guru, this and that, and I won't get into details, but he said, like, a lot of life has happened in the past 15 years, and his whole view is transformed, and he so much appreciates I didn't need an apology, but he apologized for being who he was at 17 years old. And he said he so much appreciates the efforts we've given for child protection for Prabhupada's movement. And he wanted to invite me to his home for prasadam. So I just wanted to share. It's like a story of transformation on a very individual level, not on an organizational level, but on an individual level, a very moving story of transformation that touches my heart.
Well, and it's
go ahead.
Go ahead, Sanaka.
Could you share what you mentioned before we started about the study on the impact of emotional abuse? I think that's really relevant, especially for the more recent the case of in the girls' Gurukul, because the emotional abuse that took place under Sri Radha was off the charts.
Okay, sure. Again, I'm not up on those things. I don't really study these things much anymore. But back in the day, in the 90s till about the mid 2000s, I was studying these. So the research actually indicated, and of course, all material research is imperfect, but the research indicated that the emotional wounds from emotional abuse, emotional child abuse, are deeper and more long lasting than the emotional wounds from sexual or physical child abuse. That was the clear conclusion of the research, at least as of 17 years ago. And it's counterintuitive to most people, because with sexual abuse and physical abuse, there's also emotional abuse. But they did the research in such a way to make a distinction and
isolate the two. Yeah,
isolate. Yeah.
It's interesting because oftentimes, certainly in ISKCON, there is many devotees, many leaders who say things like, "Oh, I got beaten up as a kid. It's not a big deal. I came out fine." And I look at them like, "Well, not that fine if you think that child abuse is okay." But there is this idea that if it's not sexual abuse, it's not really abuse. And I mean, if you you have read, obviously, the case files on Bhaktivedanta Purna Maharaj, but the degree, the brutality of the physical abuse that he inflicted were savage, where like he was, like kids were bleeding. They couldn't sleep. Sometimes they would pee themselves after they got beaten or while they were getting beaten. It was so extreme that it's to use the word corporal punishment. Really, it's a euphemism. It was torture.
Yeah. Thanks for emphasizing, because of course, whether I was with the state of Florida in child protection or the child protection office, of course we consider cultural norms, and in some cultures they'll send the kids to a school, and the parents will actually be upset if the parents don't hit the children sometimes like that, and even like that Dr. Sharma, who Prabhupada appointed as principal in Vrindavan. Children under his care would sometimes say he would slap us, but when he slapped us, we felt his love and affection. We knew he deserved us. So, so we understand there's cultural norms and flexibility according to that. But like, I'll say, like, even by Bengali standards, what happened in the Mayapur Gurukul to a large extent, it was just sadistic violence. It wasn't like, well, in this culture, they discipline children that way. We understand that. We do consider those things. But a lot of what happened was just sadistic violence, child physical abuse. It wasn't within the container of the cultural norm in that particular part of the world or anything like that. So
it's often bewildered me how devotees in lots of different parts of the world who found themselves as Gurukul teachers seem to have extraordinarily, wicked and malevolent forms of punishment. We hear about the machine there, this kind of subsequent beating of every student by others. But, you hear about kids being made to eat their own vomit because they, found a meal disagreeable. Being shut in cupboards, hung from windows. I mean, you're kind of wondering, these are devotees who do these things, who even dream these things up. And it'd be one thing if it was like someone snaps one day and does something regrettable and they, you know, immediately regret it. Some of these things were going on for 20, 30, 40 years. And, you know, these were planned. Someone actually had to conceive of this being the way to treat a child. To me, it's absolutely incompatible with anyone being in any kind of level of Krishna consciousnness. In fact, you heard me use the word earlier when we were talking, you know, it's hard to not conclude sociopathy, because it's devoid of anything resembling compassion, anything resembling empathy, anything resembling decency. And yet there's been far too many incidents of it. And I don't think you can put that down to, oh, well, they weren't trained how to discipline children and they didn't. No. These are extraordinary that you would ever think, anybody, that this is what you'd do to a child. Absolutely inconceivable. Let's have a look at some of the other comments. I'm mindful that we're closing in now on the 2 hours. I think this is an important comment. The CPO often, I actually hear two different kinds of criticism from the CPO. The leaders frequently complaining the CPO are too rough. Let's face it, what Lokanath did, had it been properly reported, as it should have been, would have, you know, commanded a prison sentence. And the same could be said of Bhakti Vijayapurna. To say this guy can't live in Mayapur anymore, can't give classes, you know, should step down from sannyas or whatever. This is really mellow. In fact, many people are shocked that this is the limit of the consequence. And yet we have so many, you know, expressions of misdirected compassion from other leaders. Oh, give the guy a break. You know, he should be looked at as a victim too. Strange stuff. And then there's a whole bunch of other people who say, why is the CPO so, you know, lenient? And why is the CPO so queasy? So it's almost like they can't win. Certainly the Vedic Inquirer absolutely wants to back the CPO, who have an incredibly difficult job of very qualified devotees, and often are dealing with not only the lack of support from the leadership, certainly lack of funding, but active resistance and active interference and so on. I wonder if, you know, you would, either of you, wish to say anything about the CPO and how those viewing the program and the leadership in general should think about CPO devotees.
I just want to make a comment on the how do you say? I want to emphasize the degree of I'm going to call it self-centered selfishness that is involved when somebody says some guru, influential person of influence in ISKCON, with some kind of leader, somebody that, but when they decide, my friend was censured, sent by the CPO, somehow he got some kind of punishment by the CPO. I am not happy with that. Therefore, my action is going to be to object to that in whichever way. But you know, we've seen this unfold so many times for so many high-profile cases. I would say it would be safe to say that this happened for every high-profile case. What is entailed in that is what these essentially what they're doing is they are saying, I am happy to throw child protection in ISKCON under the bus. I'm happy to undermine the protection of children in ISKCON because I'm not happy with my friend being made accountable, essentially. Therefore, I don't care about the victims of my friend. I also don't care about the fact that by undermining the Child Protection Office, I am putting at risk so many more children in ISKCON. As long as I stand a chance to get my friend off the hook, I'm going to do everything I can. I don't care about the consequences. And it's reckless. It's reckless, it's inconsiderate, it's incredibly selfish. And immature. It sounds like something a child would do. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah. Dear Govindaji, anything you wanted to add? I'm just looking at the many other comments that we haven't got to.
Yeah, too many. Thank you for that, Sanaka. I resonate with what you say. Yeah, I served as the director of Child Protection Office for more than 6 years, and sometimes we would say seriously or joking, like, oh, like after we come out with a decision or we take an action, if there's approximately an equal number of things, so you're too harsh or you're too lenient. If it's approximately equal, then probably we hit that sweet spot and we were effective. If there's equal criticism. At the same time, I don't want to be or sound cynical. The Child Protection Office service, in one sense, I'm still doing that service by being on podcasts like this. I mean, the service follows me, and I'm glad to contribute to the community in that way. But it was very challenging, lots of criticism. Also, it was not a thankless task. I received, and I still receive, a lot of appreciation. So, like, I don't want to feel cynical. I was criticized whatever I do. It's true, I was, but I also received a lot of appreciation. So it was a nasty service in many ways, but it wasn't thankless. I received a lot of appreciation, sometimes from ISKCON leaders, parents, youth, rank and file devotees. I don't know if I like that term, because like everyone's an important person. But so I know I did receive a lot of appreciation. I know I don't have much contact with those in Child Protection Office now, but I do want. I know I have had contact over the years with Leela Sukha, in more recent years with Gandharvika, Kamlesh. I want them to feel my sincere appreciation, and I know that they take a lot of criticism. I hope they also get appreciation for their efforts and appreciation, and also I'm ready to share, like if there's something that I think could be refined or some perspective I want them to see, I also feel safe to share that. So I appreciate their efforts, and I got a lot of criticism in that service, but there was and is a lot of gratitude for my meager efforts in that service. So just wanted to share that.
I'm very mindful that we've just tipped over 2 hours, so I'm going to wind down now. We may very well have follow-up episodes. I'm going to still cherry pick a couple of last quotes, but I wanted to sort of sum up. This is egregious abuse of many kinds, failing to intervene in a rampant epidemic of sexual abuse there in the Gurukul, and denying it and suppressing information about it leaking. Horrific beatings of children. We are probably talking about several hundreds of victims. To me, the scariest part of it was that it was allowed to keep going on 20 to 30 years because of leadership inaction. And I don't think they have much of a defense for any of this. Certainly, I would be encouraging the GBC to say, when you try to bypass the CPO or undermine the CPO, it only adds to the erosion of your own credibility, especially when you go into bat for one of your people and just pervert the course of justice, as they did with the Lokanath Swami case. It would actually be easier for them to just wash their hands, allow properly trained and impartial people to conduct, and let the chips fall where they may. Because now their own guilt is absolute. They stand in the dock as themselves as being, at the very least, non-effective and somewhat complicit, and also having, yes, perverted the course of justice. All right, a couple of last little quotes here. Someone talking about watching later, and yes, the responsibility of the GBC.
That's a very important point. Responsibility of the GBC maintaining the abuser in this instance as well as in a position where he's worshipped as none different from God, and in a position where he's continuing to abuse children. And again, and it's easy to find out who were the GBCs back in the 80s, the 90s. like I don't think I mentioned many names, but it's easier to find out. And yes, there were so many comments. Yeah, they should be held accountable. In a civic society, they'd be in prison. So this is such an important point. Yes.
Here's another one. Real reform will only likely happen when the rank and file really wakes up. I think that's actually beginning to happen. I'll certainly take it when there's fewer people objecting, like there were a lot of people objecting with the Lokanath case. On this case, I'm actually seeing a lot more concern. And I do think, I mean, I was actually so inspired by what Sanaka did in that class at Bhaktivedanta Manor that I was actually thinking we should have a protest movement like that, where any GBC man that sits down to give a class, there should be a bunch of people who stand up and walk out, basically saying, we don't see you as qualified to speak on the Bhagavatam as long as you're, inactive. I'm not sure if that would take off. I just thought I'd leave it out there as a possible strategy that some may, think about. Let's just have a look at some of the other comments here. How will ISKCON's fame, or even just good standing credibility, be restored? What can we do individually? Do you have any views about what you could do individually? Is it just about make your feelings known to your local GBC person, or is there something more than that?
What I see is that the problem is it's a call the cops. Yes, absolutely. What I see is that the problem is you can call it a problem, or you can just say the Bhaktivedanta Purna Swami case that just blew up in everybody's face and everybody's shocked. It's actually a mirror of the collective consciousness of the Hare Krishna society. It just showed something that was covered by a very thin veneer of is chadar and but essentially this what we see is what it is. So the collective consciousness of an ISKCON has supported, enabled, and tolerated child abuse, and Bhaktivedanta Purana as a product of that. So how do you change the collective consciousness? I can hardly change my own. Prayer, I don't know. But essentially it's the only way is to put the leadership, again, the leadership follows where they are. If there was public outrage of a significant level, the leadership would act. So
I definitely think sharing. Sorry, Sanaka, you finish.
No, go ahead. The leadership are the leaders are responsible, but I say the community is also responsible. Individually, we're responsible.
Certainly, lots of people, turned a blind eye. I mean, one thing I think, a simple thing people can do is share this video. The more people see this video, we're not here to just kind of, sniff the dirty laundry and just getting some kind of gratification out of sticking it to a bunch of sadhus. We are talking, I hope people will see very maturely, about a grievous problem. And I think the more awareness that's created, the more it potentially does create a little bit of pressure for the leaders. And at least other people are also wide awake. Dhira Govinda, were you about to say? That might have just been stifling a yawn.
No, I appreciate what you say. Yeah, well, because it's pretty common to get outraged about child abuse, and the leadership should do this and that. Yeah. So then we should do something. But then when doing something, Sanaka pointed to this earlier. Yeah, Sanaka pointed to this earlier but then, because it's sort of an assumption is like, well, yeah, no, the organization, it's corruption, the institution, the child abusers, and the assumption is, and of course, my mentor has been the one to stand courageously in the face of opposition, to stand for truth and principle, and the reality is it's almost surely not the case that the particular. So then But then once it becomes that I'll need to face that reality of my particular mentor he's really like in with the others who've been cover up, concealing, at best just acted completely negligently. Then it's kind of like, oh, I don't really have time to stand strong against child abuse. So that keeps the consciousness right where it is. Okay, so look, personally, I care a lot. Personally, in a sense, I don't care. What I'm saying is, of course, I care a lot about Prabhupada's movement. So for myself, each year of my life, I find myself more and more enthusiastic to follow Srila Prabhupada and contribute to his movement. And for a long, long time, I've been aware that each year I was becoming less enthusiastic, or really more and more disgusted at the thought of bringing people to the institution calling itself ISKCON. It's me personally. So myself, for decades, well, maybe at least 18, 19 years, I don't regard myself as a member of the institution calling itself ISKCON, and I'm deeply inspired to follow Srila Prabhupada, increase my sadhana. I've hosted thousands of home programs over the past decade. So I'm enthusiastic to share Krishna consciousness, bhakti yoga, as Prabhupada gave it to us. And that's what was happening for me back in the late 90s, early 2000s. I had lots of positions in the organization. Child protection director. I was chairman of the board of the largest devotee community in North America, and other positions. And I was finding I was very enthused to follow Prabhupada, serve his mission. And I was coming to more and more repulsed at the thought of bringing people to the organization. And in a sense, I was a face of the organization. And so anyhow, so I've not at all defected from the science of self-realization called bhakti yoga. I'm enthusiastic about that. And you might say I've defected. I'd be embarrassed to identify with the institution. And I'm a servant of the institution, meaning like I hope that through a podcast like this, that the institution improves, the individuals and as an organization. So it's not that like I don't care. I'm glad to serve the institution, and I do not identify as a member.
Yeah, last couple of comments, and I think call here for the GBC to resign. No surprises there. I mean, this has all happened on their watch, and it's not the only abuser that's been allowed to flourish without proper, intervention. All right, I'm going to leave it there because obviously at 2 hours, 12 minutes, we're already probably exceeding a lot of people. I will actually look for some help in terms of carving these up so that there are less intimidating, little segments of various talks that we can share. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating. If you wish to participate in one of these things in the future, just DM me. I'd be only too happy to accommodate you. Massive thanks again to Dhira, Govinda, and Sanaka, who've been championing this. Go ahead, Sanaka.
Just one thing I wanted to say before we go. Just before we started, I got somebody told me that it looks like the sannyas ministry has decided to take away to strip Bhaktivedanta Purana of his sannyas officially. Hopefully that information is accurate, and hopefully that will be made public soon. I just want to say I never thought I would live to see the day when Bhaktivedanta Purana would be removed from Mayapur, and what I see is Krishna's intervention. I don't. It's not something that I ever thought it was possible. And today, when I look at what's what's happening, I pray that I will live to see the day when we see even one. But it would be great if we would see all of the prominent ISKCON leaders come forward. First of all, apologize make a genuine, heartfelt apology for their involvement in concealing, minimizing, negating, protecting child abusers, for enabling child abuse. But also, if they, a friend of mine, Bhima Karma, he said that I think the last thing of value these gurus have to offer is if they were able to tell honestly their story of how they started their spiritual practice with a genuine desire, and then somehow, somewhere along the way, they got completely sidetracked by and then the desire to protect their own image, position, followers. It took over their desire for purity, and how that has undermined not only their own spiritual life, not only the spiritual life of their disciples, but it's attacking. It's an attack on ISKCON, on Srila Prabhupada's legacy.
Definitely. I mean, it's one of the main weeds, isn't it, to try and uphold one's own image, even while there's all kinds of mischievous things going on. All right. On that happy note, thank you to both of you. And again, just for all the work you've done over these years, but especially for also, laying out your thoughts today on such an important issue. Hopefully we will, as a community, eventually break the back of this thing. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And yes, please do share and comment. And let's hope that community mobilization will actually break this beast. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.